You've cancelled plans again. Not because something urgent came up, not because you're sick or overwhelmed with work. You cancelled because the thought of leaving, of putting on real clothes, of navigating small talk, of being perceived, felt like trying to breathe underwater. And now you're here, in your apartment, in your room, in the specific corner of your couch that has molded itself to your body, and you feel something strange, a mixture of profound relief and devastating guilt. Because part of you knows this isn't rest, this is refuge. There's a difference, and you feel it in your bones. Rest is restorative. Rest prepares you to re-engage with the world. But refuge? Refuge is what you seek when the world feels like a threat. And somewhere along the way, without you quite noticing when it happened, your home stopped being the place you return to and became the place you hide in. The four walls that once held you now define you. The door that should swing both ways only seems to open inward. You tell yourself you're an introvert, that you're just someone who recharges alone. And maybe that's true. But if you're honest, really, brutally honest, you know it's more than that. Because introverts still go out. Introverts still maintain friendships, still show up for people they love, still participate in the world. What you're doing isn't introversion. It's something closer to voluntary invisibility. Here's the paradox that defines your existence. The thing that once saved you is now the thing slowly erasing you. At some point in your development, maybe in childhood, maybe in adolescence, maybe after a specific trauma you can name, you learned that the world outside was unpredictable, exhausting, or dangerous in ways both obvious and subtle. You learned that people were unreliable, that social situations required a performance you didn't have the energy to sustain. That vulnerability was a liability. And so you did what any intelligent organism does when faced with consistent threat. You adapted. You retreated. You made yourself small, made your world smaller, and you survived. And it worked. God, it worked so well. Your home became your monastery, your fortress, your entire universe. Within these walls, you didn't have to explain yourself. You didn't have to manage other people's emotions or navigate their expectations. You didn't have to be on. You could just be. And for a while, maybe a long while, this felt like the most profound kind of freedom. But here's what nobody tells you about building fortresses. Eventually, you forget they have doors. Eventually, the walls that were meant to keep danger out start keeping life out too. And the safety you've cultivated so carefully begins to feel less like peace and more like a very comfortable cage. Let's talk about what's actually happening in your nervous system, because this isn't laziness or antisocial behavior or personal failure. This is your autonomic nervous system stuck in a chronic state that psychologists call hypervigilant withdrawal, a specific trauma response where the nervous system has learned that engagement with the external world requires more energy than the system can safely expend. Think of your nervous system like a country's defense budget. In a healthy system, you have resources allocated to growth, exploration, connection, what's called the social engagement system in Polyvagal Theory. But if you grew up in an environment of chronic stress, unpredictability, or emotional neglect, your nervous system made a strategic decision. It diverted almost all resources to threat detection and self-protection. There's no budget left for exploration. The country is on permanent lockdown. This is why leaving your house doesn't just feel inconvenient, it feels existentially expensive. Your nervous system is quite literally calculating that the cost of engagement exceeds the benefit. It's not being dramatic. It's being consistent with the data it's collected over years, maybe decades. Now, let's introduce a second concept, agoraphobia without panic disorder. Traditional agoraphobia is characterized by intense panic attacks in open or crowded spaces. But there's a subtler version that doesn't involve panic at all, just a quiet, persistent dread. A sense that the outside world is simply too much. Not dangerous in any specific way, just overwhelming. This is what you're experiencing. Your threat isn't external and concrete. It's internal and diffuse. The world hasn't hurt you in one dramatic way. It's exhausted you in 1,000 small ways. The third framework we need is avoidant attachment style, which develops when a child learns that their emotional needs will not be consistently met, so they adapt by simply needing less, by becoming self-sufficient to the point of isolation. Adults with avoidant attachment don't avoid people because they hate them. They avoid people because closeness feels like a debt they can't pay. Every relationship is a mortgage on their limited emotional resources, and staying home is the only way to avoid foreclosure. Here's the neurological reality. Your brain has physically rewired itself around isolation. The default mode network, the neural system active when you're at rest and not focused on the outside world, has become your primary mode of operation. Most people's brains toggle between internal reflection and external engagement. Your brain has learned to camp out in the internal space because that's where it feels safe. Over time, the neural pathways for social engagement have literally atrophied from underuse, the same way muscles weaken when immobilized. This is why forcing yourself out doesn't immediately feel better. You're not just fighting a mood, you're fighting your brain's fundamental architecture. You've trained your nervous system that home equals survival, and everything else equals risk. And nervous systems, once trained, are very hard to retrain. But here's the cost you don't talk about, the price you pay in silence. You are living a life of perpetual postponement. Every invitation declined is a future version of yourself you're abandoning. Every weekend spent alone is another deposit into the account of your eventual regret. You tell yourself, maybe next time, but both you and the people who invite you are starting to realize there won't be a next time. There's just this time, this continuous, eternal present tense of absence. And the loneliness isn't even the worst part. You've made peace with loneliness. You've romanticized it even. Called it solitude and self-care and honoring your needs. What you can't make peace with is the growing suspicion that you're not protecting yourself. You're abandoning yourself. That the person you're hiding from isn't the world, it's you. The version of you that wants connection and adventure and risk and mess and all the beautiful, terrible chaos of being alive. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote about what he called the sickness unto death. A despair so profound, it's not about wanting to die, but about being unable to truly live. It's the despair of someone who has the capacity for selfhood but chooses to hide from it. He wrote, "The greatest danger, that of losing oneself, can pass off in the world as quietly as if it were nothing. Every other loss, an arm, a leg, $5, a wife, etc., is bound to be noticed. This is your danger. Not that something terrible will happen to you out there in the world, but that nothing will happen at all. That you will arrive at the end of your life having been perfectly safe and perfectly absent. That you will have spent decades in the waiting room of your own existence. You carry an invisible grief. Grief for the friendships that dissolved not through conflict, but through your consistent absence. Grief for the career opportunities you didn't pursue because they required too much visibility. Grief for the romantic relationships that never began because intimacy requires the one thing you cannot give, sustained presence. Grief for the version of yourself that needed the world to be gentler than it was, and because it wasn't, decided to stop participating. The cruel irony is that you've made yourself into an expert on your own avoidance. You've memorized all the rational reasons why staying home makes sense. You've collected evidence of the world's hostility, like a prosecutor building an airtight case. You've become so articulate about why you can't that you've forgotten how to imagine what you could. And here's the most painful part. Some tiny, stubborn part of you still remembers what it felt like to be connected, to laugh with friends until your stomach hurt, to feel the electricity of new experiences, to be spontaneous and foolish and gloriously, messily alive. That memory is why you feel guilty when you cancel. It's your authentic self, sending distress signals from beneath the layers of protection you've buried it under. Let's talk about what this actually looks like in your daily life. Because these aren't abstract concepts. They're the architecture of your existence. You might have become someone who can only maintain friendships digitally. You're responsive in group chats, thoughtful in your texts, present in the way that requires no physical presence. But when someone suggests meeting up, you feel a surge of anxiety that you've learned to disguise as logistics. "I'm so busy," you say, when what you mean is, "I'm terrified of the moment when I'll run out of things to say, and you'll see how hollow I've become." You've likely developed an elaborate system for managing expectations. You warn people you're bad at texting, or really introverted, or going through a lot right now, creating a preemptive defense against their eventual disappointment. You're not managing your availability, you're managing their inevitable abandonment of you, trying to control the narrative before they write you off entirely. Your home has probably become a character in your psychological drama. You've optimized it for maximum comfort and minimum need to leave. Every streaming service, multiple food delivery apps, a collection of hobbies that require no audience. You've built not just a home, but an ecosystem designed to eliminate any practical reason for departure. You haven't decorated a space, you've engineered a self-sufficient bubble. You might have a career that enables your isolation. Remote work, freelancing, anything that allows you to exist professionally without existing socially. And you're good at it because work that happens through screens is work where you can control your presentation entirely. You've become a curator of your own image, showing people only the polished, prepared version of yourself, while the authentic version atrophies in private. Your relationship with time has become distorted. Weeks blend into months. You tell yourself you'll be more social once things calm down, but things never calm down because the chaos isn't external. It's the constant noise of your own avoidance. You're always preparing to live, never actually living. You're the perpetual understudy in the production of your own life. You've likely developed a complicated relationship with substances or numbing behaviors. Not necessarily addiction in the clinical sense, but certainly dependence on alcohol, cannabis, social media, pornography, binge watching, anything that helps you tolerate the endless hours of your own company without having to fully feel what you're avoiding. And perhaps most tellingly, you've become someone who experiences other people's happiness as a referendum on your failure. You see photos of friends at gatherings you declined to attend, and you don't feel excluded. You feel exposed. Like everyone can see that you're choosing this, that you're complicit in your own exile. And that knowledge is more painful than simple loneliness. Here's what you need to understand. These aren't personality traits. These are coping mechanisms that have calcified into identity. You're not inherently someone who just likes being home. You're someone who learned that being home was safer than being seen, and you've built an entire life around that lesson. The work of unlearning begins with witnessing. Not changing, not fixing, just honestly seeing what you've done to survive and recognizing it for what it is. You cannot gaslight yourself into health. You cannot pretend that voluntary isolation is the same as intentional solitude. The first step is terrifying and simple. You have to stop calling this a preference and start calling it a pattern. So what does healing actually look like for someone who has made a fortress of their home? It starts with understanding that you cannot think your way out of a nervous system problem. Your brain has collected evidence that the world is threatening. No amount of rational argument will override that data. The only thing that can override it is new data. Embodied, lived experiences that teach your nervous system it's safe to engage. This is the work of graduated exposure, but not in the clinical, desensitized sense. This is about reintroducing yourself to the world in doses small enough that your nervous system doesn't flood with panic. A walk around your neighborhood, 5 minutes at a coffee shop, one social commitment per week that you don't cancel. These aren't grand gestures, they're micro investments in a different future. You need to practice something psychologists call window of tolerance expansion. The range of stimulation your nervous system can handle without going into shutdown or hyperarousal. Right now, your window is very narrow. You're either in your home feeling flat and numb, or you're out in the world feeling overwhelmed and desperate to return. Healing means slowly, patiently widening that window until you can be in the world without it feeling like a constant emergency. There's also the profound work of inner child reparenting, going back to the younger version of you who decided the world wasn't safe and offering them something they never got. The experience of being protected while still being present. You have to become the adult who can hold the scared child's hand and say, "I know it's scary and we're doing it anyway, and I won't abandon you in it." You must learn to choose softness over safety. Safety keeps you alive. Softness keeps you human. Safety builds walls. Softness builds bridges. And yes, bridges require vulnerability, require maintenance, require the risk that someone might cross towards you and see you as you actually are. But that's the only way back to aliveness. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he also understood that becoming requires unbecoming, shedding the protective identities we've constructed, dismantling the fortresses we've hidden in, and having the courage to stand in the open air of our own authenticity, even when it feels like exposure. This isn't about becoming social. This isn't about forcing yourself to be extroverted or pretending you love crowds or abandoning your need for solitude. This is about reclaiming your agency, about making sure that when you stay home, it's a choice born from genuine desire, not compulsive avoidance. That's the difference between solitude and isolation. Solitude is chosen. Isolation is suffered. The truth is, you are not broken. You are defended. And defenses, once necessary, can become prisons when the original threat has passed. Your work is to assess, honestly, is the world still as dangerous as your nervous system believes? Or have you been living in response to a past that's no longer present? Healing doesn't mean you'll suddenly want to be out every night. It means you'll have the freedom to choose, to say yes when you want to say yes, to stay home when it truly serves you, not when it's the only option your fear allows. Here's what I want you to know. Every time you choose presence over protection, you are not just living your life, you are authoring it. Every time you show up despite the discomfort, you are casting a vote for the person you want to become. And slowly, accumulation by accumulation, those votes matter. They reshape your neural pathways. They rewrite your story. The goal isn't to be fixed. The goal is to be whole. And wholeness includes all of you, the part that needs rest and the part that craves connection, the part that seeks shelter and the part that wants adventure. You are not meant to choose between them. You are meant to integrate them. So the next time someone invites you somewhere, before you automatically decline, pause, feel the fear, name it, thank it for trying to protect you. And then, gently, firmly, ask yourself, what would the version of me I'm trying to become choose in this moment? That's where healing lives, in that space between stimulus and response. In that pause before the automatic no, you have stayed home long enough. The world is still waiting, and so is the person you've been too afraid to become. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more essays on the hidden psychology of everyday suffering. And remember, the door opens both ways. You've just forgotten how to turn the handle. The world doesn't need you to be different. It needs you to be present, and you need that too.